Where my girls at? Where my girls at? Independent, free spirit. Ooh, it's some serious. Where my girls at? We linked up in a cool minute. Where my girls at? It's going down, down. Where my girls at? It's going down, down. It's going down tonight. We going out tonight. Yeah, right. We going out tonight. It's going down tonight. Yeah, right. It's going down tonight. We going out tonight. Yeah, right. We going out tonight. It's going down tonight. Yeah, right.
Welcome, everyone. We got issues. Don't we all have issues? I am honored to be your guest host today. My name is Sean Smith, and today we're going to talk about some issues. We are going to talk about some daddy issues. That's what we're going to talk about today, and hopefully you're going to get a lot out of this program. And let's be honest, we all got daddy issues, right? We all got daddies. And so we've got some daddy issues to confront, to dissect, to hopefully shift, and maybe even dissolve. Who knows? The girls are out of town tonight. The ladies are off having fun, transforming lives somewhere, I'm sure. Katrina, Crisette, Gloria, and Sabrina will be back on Monday. And I've been a guest on this show a couple times, talking about racism and talking about politics. And now I am insanely honored to actually be hosting today. And they said, what do you want to talk about? And I was like, let's get into some deep issues. Let's get into some deep dive on daddy stuff. Right. So thank you all for tuning in to the radio. If you're listening on the radio, you might be watching online at theforceoffriendship.com or the Facebook groups, wherever you are. I'd love for this to be an interactive experience for myself and for all of you. So if you're watching online, go ahead and post comments. If you are able to call into the radio station, you could do that. 313-778-7600. And we will check in with you all and look at some of the comments and maybe even take a caller or two if we're able to do that. So let's just check in. When I've been on the line a couple times, the ladies spend the first few minutes just going like, what's up? What's going on in your life? And so they encourage me to do that. So let me just give you a little check-in on what's going on in my life. I'll tell you a little bit more about who I am and set up the content here for the conversation. But it's tough for me to not think about politics. Are you guys paying attention to politics? And if you are paying attention to politics, here's what I'd actually really love to know. What do you do to stay sane? I mean, honestly, like, what do you do to maintain your sanity? I've never paid attention to politics. So there's a piece of me that actually wishes I didn't know about the hearings and the raids and all the stuff that's going on. There was a part in my life just a few years ago, actually, I didn't have any idea what a Republican was, what a Democrat was. But then I looked up one day and I was like, oh my goodness. Katrina says there's news happening as I'm talking. There's a part of me that's like, I got to know what's going on. I won't check in. I want to be here with you all talking about this conversation. But what got me into politics actually is I looked up a few years ago and I had been really studying what we're going to get into today in this show, really looking at the masculinity and masculine wounds and how we as men are so fragile and what we do because of that. And a lot of this came from my own personal experience of healing a lot of my mommy issues. And I did a one-man show and all this stuff, right? And so I'm diving into all of this, and I look up and I go, well, gosh darn it, we just elected the masculine wound. Like we elected the essence of the masculine wound. That was my assessment of Trump at the time, is that this dude is the masculine wound, right? And so then I became interested, but mostly from the personal behavioral side of it, right? Like how are personal dynamics applied to politics? I still don't love the idea of politics. And, it's mostly like, it actually leads directly into this content, because it's kind of like, a bunch of wounded white dudes afraid of losing power, doing everything they can to stay alive and stay relevant and stay in power and all that stuff. I mean, politics is really about power. So when I dive into politics, it just feels so messy to get caught in the weeds, right? But I like to pull out and just go, okay, what's the human side of all of this? And how can I make sense of it? And how can I maybe contribute to something positive or whatever? But seriously, I would love to know what you do to maintain your sanity if you pay attention to politics, and you can share some resources with me. So that's as deep as I want to go into politics and some of that other stuff, at least for now. So let's get into today's topic. I don't know if you saw it on screen, those of you listen online. I literally just started to clap my hands like a little seal, right? Like, let's go, let's have some fun. This is a deep subject, or at least it can potentially be a deep subject. And I want to keep it light where I can and go deep where we must. But let's have a good conversation here. And so let me tell you a little bit more about who I am and why I am hosting today and why I'm talking about this conversation. So I've been a life coach for almost 20 years now. I've been a speaker for pretty much all that time. I am a brand new author. I do have a book. Finally, it's like in my hands. I could touch it. I could open the pages and read it. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a teacher. That's really what lights me up, is just teaching concepts. And I like to teach really anything to anybody that's going to listen. And especially if it's going to help us change our lives or understand, what we do. I do a lot of other stuff too. I do poetry. I produce, I act. There's a lot of stuff that I've got my hands on in the artistic world, but primarily I'm a teacher. And so about 5 years into my career, I've been coaching primarily women. Almost all of the women that I was coaching at that time were in Mary Kay. And I would have never thought that I was going to be coaching women in Mary Kay, coaching women in general. It just wasn't a part of my plan, but as fate would have it, that's where I ended up. And so I started to do a lot of this deep work, and I really wanted to help people with confidence and help people set goals and all the things that we can do in our lives, right? To just better ourselves and increase our achievement. And what I found is that specifically for the women I was working with, the majority of their challenges that were showing up in business or relationships or in marriage or with weights or any of the other challenges that so many of us have in life, the majority of them ended up being self-esteem issues. And the self-esteem conversation, after about a couple of years, I recognized the self-esteem conversation always goes straight to dad. And so I learned early on that daddy issues are directly related to self-esteem challenges. Now, that phrase daddy issues is an interesting one. I actually posted on Facebook earlier today, just what is your connotation of daddy issues? What does it mean to you? And I'd love for you to let us know too. If you're watching online, go ahead and type in the comment section. What would you say daddy issues are? Like, what does that actually mean? Not how they manifest, but what do daddy issues actually mean? I asked Facebook that, and basically there was a collection of similar answers, and they were saying, it's the imprint that we have from our fathers. It affects the romantic relationships a lot of time for women. Women oftentimes marry their dads, or they marry the exact opposite of their dads, or their partners can never live up to their dads, depending on the relationship. And for the most part, I agree with all of that pretty much collectively, right? And if we look deeper into daddy issues from a systemic issue or a foundational conversation, really what we're going to land on is masculinity in general. And so later in the program, I'm going to talk about masculinity versus femininity. And I really want to give you a better understanding of the masculine wound. This is what I call the issues that usually manifest into a lot of men's behavior, a lot of issues between dads and daughters. So I want to give you the bottom up approach for the most part here. And as I said, sometimes it's going to be deep. Sometimes, we'll try to keep it light, but let's dive in. Speaking of light, by the way, I want to get your idea on this. So I have a product idea and I don't know if it actually has some traction or not. And you guys might actually push me one way or the other. So I have a product idea and I want to create shoes. And on the side of the shoes, the brand will say daddy-ish. Ish means what it means, right? And so the shoe will say daddy-ish, but then what it'll be, but those will be your daddy-ish shoes. So it's like you'll be walking around in your daddy-ish shoes, right? So there's a piece of me that actually really, really wants to do this. All right, I'm getting a little bit of love in the comment section. Cool. And it is a way to kind of like make some light of it, right? Like you're just going to walk around with your daddy issues tonight. And, and just incorporate it into our lives, right? So I hope there's something in this conversation for all of you. I'm going to be talking a lot to the women in this conversation. I hope I can get you to start asking certain questions, maybe understand your father a little bit more. To any of you dads that are listening, maybe help you understand yourself or how we're programmed as men and maybe open up some communication. But everybody has a dad regardless, right? Regardless of how that relationship was, everybody has a father. And as I said, this is a self-esteem issue, especially for women, because a father's pride, that just like literally just stopped me in saying that. I have a daughter who's 20 years old. And so a lot of this stuff I'm like living, in this moment. But a father's pride is the main ingredient in a daughter's self-esteem. A father's pride is the main ingredient in the daughter's self-esteem. It's not the only ingredient, and I actually don't think it's the core ingredient, but it's the main ingredient so that when daughters grow up, when little girls grow up, one of the first things they are going to assess is whether daddy is proud of me or not, which is the title of my book, Daddy, Are You Proud of Me? I'll tell you a little bit more about that concept later on. But if our self-esteem is low, whether we're daughters growing up and looking at our dads, or we're sons, or, wherever we are and whatever roles we play, whenever our self-esteem is low as humans, we tend to overcompensate to make us feel better, right? And usually we try to do it with performance of some kind. My experience is that men tend to overcompensate with power, competition, win, overpower somebody or something. And women tend to overcompensate with pleasing. First of all, let me know if you agree with that. I know we're using broad strokes here of an overgeneralization, but women just tend to overcompensate in different ways than men tend to overcompensate. And when I was diving into all of this for so long, I just, it started to change the way I parented my daughter. I started to tell her, I'm proud of you, like even when she was asleep, because I know the unconscious mind never turns off. And then finally one day I was like, somebody's got to write a book, to tell dads, because we didn't get any manuals and we didn't grow up like our little girls are growing up. So we don't really know what to do. And somebody's got to write this book. So finally I looked down and I recognized my name tag said somebody on it. And I ended up writing this book. And we're about to go to a commercial break here for a moment, but I just want to tell you a couple of things that I've learned about daddy issues. Number one, having a little girl is extremely disruptive for most men. I've talked to a lot of men that have daughters, and I always ask them, what was the first thought you had when you saw your little girl? And most of them have some version of the same thing. It's some version of, oh my God, I can't believe this. This is incredible. This is amazing. But can I do this? Like, can I protect her? Can I provide all the things that I want to provide for her? Am I man enough? The second thing that I've learned is that this isn't new information, I'm sure, to most of you, especially those women out there. Your daddy is your first love as a little girl, and our mommies are our first loves usually as little boys, right? The final thing is that as a daughter, you learn what your daddy loves. So you will often become what you believe your daddy will love in a relationship. So if you see your daddy has a good relationship with your mom, you might want to become your mom because that's what your daddy loves. But if your mom and dad have a lot of strife in their relationship, you might decide to not be your mom because your daddy doesn't love that version of a woman. And so a lot of times women don't just marry their dad, they marry who their dad married. And that's an important distinction because you can actually change the magnet that you're attracting. I know that's a little bit of a cliffhanger. We're going to stop there. We're going to jump to some commercials here, and we'll be right back in a few minutes. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. I am your guest host today, Sean Smith. We are talking about daddy issues. The thing that I just said right before the break, I think is really important to grab. A lot of times women don't marry their dads. They marry who their dads married, or they marry who they believe their dads would marry. And so for any of you fathers out there or men who are going to be fathers, understand that concept that we are showing our daughters who we love and respect. And they're paying attention. One of my favorite parenting concepts is that the kids are watching the show. They are not listening to the lecture. So we do have a caller I want to bring in here in a moment, but I want to start this section with something that I've noticed in my coaching that is like a kind of a diagnostic sort of tool. So I'm going to share with you 5 behavior patterns that I've seen in my coaching of low self-esteem. And especially for those of you women that are listening right now, I want to see if you can find yourself in one or more than one of these patterns. You're not just going to be in one of these patterns, but there's going to be some of each of these in some of you. So the first behavior pattern that I've noticed in low self-esteem, I call constant sacrificing. And that's when women don't even dare to have a goal or go after their dreams because it's just easier not to. You know, it's easier not to have a dream than it is to have one and never get it. And so a lot of women have their dream switch turned off. And so they're constantly just sacrificing what they want in their life because on some level, that's actually emotionally safer, or at least that's how they perceive it. The second pattern is constant sabotaging. So some women do have dreams, but they constantly get in their own way. And by the way, as I go through these, if you recognize any of them in yourself, please comment, let us know what is landing for you and where you see yourself in here. So a lot of women are constantly sabotaging themselves because they don't think that they deserve success. They don't believe that they have the self-worth to succeed. And so their own sabotaging patterns are always going to keep them from the success that they don't believe they deserve. The third pattern is called constant settling. So some women do achieve some of their goals, but then they let some of them slip away because they don't believe they deserve sustained success. They don't believe that they deserve to hold on to their success. And what I found is that a lot of times they tend to put more focus on the less fulfilling goals because those ones are just a little less painful if you fail, right? The fourth behavior pattern is called constant self-smothering. So some women have all the capability to achieve all their dreams, and they believe that they can, but they dim their own light and achievement because of how it might make other people feel around them. So if I shine really brightly, people are not going to like it. My friends or family members are going to feel worse about themselves. And so I'd rather just suppress, right? I'd rather just keep my voice hidden and depress the things that I really want to share and the things that I really want to do. And so I call that the self-smothering pattern. And then the final one is constant suffering via success. So some women become actually addicted to success, succeeding everywhere with everything, doing everything really well, no matter where they go. There's a lot of perfection in the way they look and the way that they talk and the way that they do everything, which is great. It's a high level of achievement, but sometimes it doesn't fulfill anything, you know, because there is this void underneath, and that can become really frustrating. That's why I called it suffering via success, because a lot of women believe they are winning in their minds, but they're just not happy in their hearts. So if any of those are landing for you, what I can virtually promise you is that there's a self-esteem target for you to look at. And it might not make sense right away, but underneath all of the patterns is likely going to be some kind of a self-esteem issue to address here, right? All right, so let's go to a caller, Dorothy. If we can patch a caller in, if she's still on the line. Let's connect with Grace if we're able to.
How are you, young man? Amazing. Thank you. I'm going to say I'm well. Something you said earlier about the father thing, and I'm going to answer your little test there. I happen to not identify with neither of those 4 or 5 of them you said. I don't identify closer to the last one, but there are things that it's kind of out the other way. But I'm going to say this: I'm a high achiever, and pretty much anything I set myself to do, I kind of exceed all expectations, and I've always been that particular child. I am my worst critic, and people normally can't tell anything about me because I already know it. So you can't really tell me something about me that I already know. I've identified who I was very, very early on. So what is your opinion on that? And normally I don't ever really ask people opinion about me. But I wanted to know because I did not try with none of that. But the last one, it was the things in there. Because I had started the project and I'm trying to do all of them at one time. And some of them took back seat. But did I complete them? Yes. Sure. But I started off wanting to just get it all done, but something took back seat. But normally, I am an overachiever. And something you said about the father. I never really wanted to marry my father. The only thing I really liked about him, to be honest, I love my dad, okay? But my dad was very athletic. And that right there, in my mind, I wanted a man that was very athletic. That was first and foremost. Yeah, that makes sense. Yes, my father treated us was very sexually promiscuous, and I hated that because he was married to my mother. I gravitated towards my mother because I loved her values. She was very nurturing. She wasn't overly nurturing. She gave me exactly what I needed and made me work for the rest. And that what made me very strong. I don't know. I'm going to ask this. When you're findings, when you're talking to these people, is it diverse? Because I don't want to necessarily lean one way that, African American people and Hispanic people or Caucasian people, I believe it's different. I understand there's a common element there, but there's a difference between one's culture. Okay, and I just kind of wanted to put that in there and find out what your views were as far as what I just gave you a little bit. Yeah, thank you for that.
I think hopefully, I think a lot of people probably can resonate with a lot of the things that you say. So you asked my opinion, and my immediate opinion is that it sounds like you don't have a void of self-esteem, which is great. So those behavior patterns are what I've found that are built upon low self-esteem. That doesn't mean you're void of all challenges, because self-esteem is not the only problem that we can have in our lives, right? So it sounds like with your self-punishment, which is actually more of a masculine thing. So what we're going to talk about after the break is a little bit more about masculinity and femininity. And so I would say that's where your opportunity is to pay attention to how you are potentially, not giving yourself the space to just be maybe as authentic as you are, or just maybe bask in your achievements. It sounds like you're a high achiever, as you said. And if you are punishing yourself a little bit too much, or, nobody can criticize you as much as you can criticize yourself, then we might be able to help you expand your experience of that success, rather than maybe constantly dismissing it, or, just not, I would imagine you're on to the next thing, right? You achieve something because you're a high achiever. That's how you see yourself. And then you're on to the next thing. And so I just want to make sure that you experience the joy and the fulfillment that's available from all of your hard work and all of your hard effort. I don't have the time that I think would require to get into the promiscuity and what you saw in your dad and so forth. I just want to thank you for that. I think a lot of people will resonate with it. And just on the surface, it makes sense, that you wanted to be athletic and you wanted to be a high achiever. And that's probably what you saw your dad valuing. And, it sounds like you got a lot to be thankful for. So I appreciate you calling in, and hopefully there's a lot that people could find themselves in that conversation in some way or another, even if it's just like, well, that's not my story. My story is the exact opposite of that. And I do also agree that there's a lot of nuances here. There's cultural programming, and there's a lot of different ingredients across various races and different cultures and genders and generations and all that kind of stuff. And, when we teach this at the foundational level, we try to teach it in a simplistic way, but always there's going to be other things to consider. So we're going to come back from the break here in a moment. I'm going to tee this conversation up. When we open up daddy issues, when we open up masculinity in general, I think it's important that we understand what masculinity actually is and what femininity actually is. When I started studying that a few years ago, it totally changed the way I thought about this whole process, and it changed my relationships with my wife, with my mother-in-law, with, all kinds of women specifically in my life. And really what we need to understand is that the masculine energy, because this is more of a masculine feminine thing, not necessarily a male female thing, although there is a lot of overlap. But the masculine energies, top priorities are to protect and provide for the most part. Those are the two things that the masculine energy wants to do. The feminine energy generally wants to nurture and create. The feminine energy doesn't want to protect and provide. It wants to nurture and create. So if we understand the foundation from these energies, now we can see how they play each other and how they manifest with each other. So we're going to dive deeper in that on the other side of the break. We will be right back. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. I am your guest host, Sean Smith. We are talking about daddy issues. We just had a really good conversation briefly with the caller calling in, and I'm looking at some of the comments that you guys are making, those of you that are watching online, and I really appreciate the interaction. It's great to see what is landing for you guys, and I got some positive reaction to my merchandise idea. I don't know, maybe I should have asked people to not say anything or have you guys sign an NDA or something like that, but it's cool to see your reactions to that. So one of the questions that we had is about clarifying those 5 patterns that I mentioned a moment ago. So I just want to do that real quick. I'm not going to reteach them, but these are the patterns that I've seen that low self-esteem tends to create in women. One of them is constant sacrificing, where women have a dream, but they don't allow themselves to go after it. Another one is, or they don't even have a dream, rather. Constant sabotaging is when you sabotage the dream because you don't believe you deserve success. Constant settling is when you don't believe you deserve sustained success. And so you settle on some of the lower goals that you have, but not after, you don't go after the big ones. Constant self-smothering is when you dim your own light because you don't want it to be a negative effect on other people. And then finally, constant suffering via success. That's when women become addicted to success. But all of these are coming from a void of low self-esteem. And I also am not saying that all women have low self-esteem. So I hope that is very clear and apparent. But when you do have low self-esteem, these are going to be some of the patterns that you're going to find. And we're going to need to target in on your relationship with your dad. Now, speaking of your dad, going back to what I just said right before the break, that masculinity is really about protecting and providing. That's what that energy is. So your father's relationship with you, your father's relationship with himself, your father's actions, behaviors, everything about him can be understood more likely if you see that all of that is a function of his perspective of himself, looking through those filters, looking through his ability to protect and provide. Whatever his self-esteem is or self-concept is, then that's going to fuel his behavior patterns. It's going to fuel his relationships. If there's some kind of a void that he feels because he feels impotent in protecting or providing, and impotent is a word that just means not potent. It doesn't always mean the sexual connotation that we make it mean. It just means I'm not potent. I'm not able. I'm not powerful enough to do the things that I want to do. And that's one of the worst things for men to feel. You know, a really important word to men is the word, or at least the concept and the idea of useful. If I don't feel useful as a man, especially through the filters of protecting and providing, if I don't feel useful as a man, then I'm useless, right? It's the opposite. I'm useless. And if I feel useless, I won't feel very valid as a man. Like I'm not even a man if I'm not useful. And so when I feel that I'm not valid, I have this void inside me, then I'm going to try to fill that void through some kind of overcompensation. And usually that's when we try to get it through those same filters of protecting and providing or competing and like trying to get the power back inside of us. And I want to say that this whole conversation is really about our programming, right? Self-esteem is a function of the programming that you had growing up. Your father's livelihood and all the behavior patterns that he has is a function of his programming growing up, right? So there's a really important distinction that we always make between the person and the programming. So if your father has done things like the caller said, her father was really promiscuous, that's his programming. And I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm not trying to defend anything in particular on behalf of men or men in general. I'm just wanting to help us understand, either understand ourselves or understand the people that we are in relationship with through these lenses. So I mentioned the masculine wound earlier. This is everything, you guys. This when the masculine energy, which is all about being potent and being able to win, when the masculine energy is wounded, the masculine energy tends to hurt others externally. That's why men tend to abuse outwardly. Men are usually the perpetrators of more violent acts and random acts of violence. That is the masculine wound being projected outward. When the feminine energy is wounded, it tends to retreat. The feminine is not a fighter. The feminine energy, that doesn't mean women aren't fighters. By the way, remember, this is masculine, feminine, not female, male. And we all have this energy inside of us. We all have both energies inside of us. But the feminine energy is really about creation and flow and intuition and love and acceptance. Whereas the masculine energy is rigid, it's unwavering, it's right and wrong, it's intellect, it's power. And if I feel like I've gotten my power taken away, then I want to get it back. That's what fuels the masculine wound. So one of the things that the caller said a moment ago is that she beats herself up. So as a woman, if you are beating yourself up, that punishment is actually a masculine act. The act of punishing, especially based on rules that aren't being followed, that's a masculine act. Now, you can be a female acting in your masculine energy and punish, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just trying to create the distinction between when we're acting in and from our masculine energy and when we're acting in and from our feminine energy. And it's really important to understand this in terms of the daddy issues conversation, right? And so if we take this concept a little deeper, hopefully it'll make more sense that when the masculine is wounded, the masculine is actually afraid of anything that's going to shine a light on its wound. Anything that's going to expose its vulnerability is a threat. And so what the masculine wound does is it tries to protect against itself being exposed. Sometimes it manifests in cheating. Because if I have a wound, see how I put this together for you. If I have a wound inside me and I feel like maybe I'm not good enough or I'm not valid or my wife doesn't love me, and trust me, please, even as soon as I said that out of my mouth, I'm not trying to pin this on anybody. I'm not trying to blame or anything. I'm just trying to hopefully explain this. If my perception is that, if my perception as a man is wounded, then I want to try to get my power back. So one of the things that the masculine programming says is go conquer something. Go conquer something. And if you were wounded by a woman, then go conquer a woman. Because that just makes sense, doesn't it? If my core wound is from a woman, then I think in my masculine wounded thinking, I think that if I conquer a woman and I can overpower a woman and I can take that back from what was taken from me, then we're good, right? And then quickly we realize, no, that's not actually how it works, because that's not what created the void in the first place. So I want to just explain a little bit to you so you understand that that your fathers, I'm speaking directly to daughters now, that your father's behavior patterns and his worldview and everything that he does really is going to be a function of how deep his wounds are. And we're all wounded. As humans, we are all wounded. But how deep his wounds are, and then how did he try his best to overcompensate for those wounds? And very, very rarely does it actually have anything to do with the people that the wound hurts. So I really hurt my mom for the longest time in my relationship, but it wasn't because she actually did anything bad. In fact, the more loving and more nurturing that she was to me, the more I wanted to hurt her. I know it might not make any sense, especially if you're on the other side of it, but to me, her shining her light was actually a threat to me. You know, I said I did this one-man play. I dove into what was causing me to be such a verbal bully to my mom for so long, and how I treated other women in my life. And I ended up sort of personifying this pain inside my body. I've since written a poem about it, and it's turned into a song. And I just want to tell you, I just want to share 4 lines of it with you, just so that you understand this concept in maybe a little bit of a poetic package here. And I'm speaking as the wound. I'm speaking as the personification of the wound, which for me was a werewolf inside of me that just didn't feel loved and didn't feel good enough. And so the werewolf says, human eyes supposedly are the windows into our soul. But when you get too close to me, mine feels empty and unwhole. In the eye contact shows me things I wish weren't true. And I hate what I see, that reflection of me. And I need you to be miserable too. This is how the wound works. I'm not excusing, I'm not defending, I'm not misdirecting, but this is how the wound works when it's seeing the world through its wounds. And so a lot of times men don't have the capacity, because of the wound, to actually see what's in front of them, especially their little girls, their little daughters, because the brighter that your light shines, the more illuminated my insecurities get. And it might not make any sense in the world why I might project that onto this creature that I created, that I co-created, but it might manifest in other ways. It might manifest in emotional avoidance or emotional absence, or it might manifest in abandonment or some other way. But what I really want you to get, and we're going to take a commercial break here in a moment, what I really want you to get is that these actions are a function of the wound. It's not a function of anything you did wrong or any inadequacy that you have. All right, we're going to go to a commercial break. We'll be right back and wrap up this conversation. All right, all right. Let's see if we can land this plane, huh? If you're just joining us, I am the guest host today on We Got Issues, and we are talking about one of those issues. We are talking about daddy issues. And for those of you typing in comments, those of you watching online, I really appreciate the interaction I see, especially from that last section. I see several of you saying, like, this is deep, but it's necessary. It's deep, but it's necessary. That's the thing. And we got to go into the roots if we're going to do anything about the fruits, right? If we're going to talk about the symptoms in our lives, we need to look at the systems that are creating it. It's really the only way that we're going to make any sort of long lasting change. I know it's deep, but I was like, if there's an audience that could handle it, it's an audience that listens to a show called We Got Issues, right? It's an audience that's been primed for a long time. And I really honor and appreciate all of you that are willing to lean into some of this deeper work. So I just gave you a few nuggets from a poem that I wrote that has since turned into a song, actually. And if any of you want more content that I've done a bunch of videos and articles and audios on all kinds of things related to masculinity. You can go to my main website, coachshansmith.com. Sean is SEAN / masculinity. And it's got a bunch of resources. And there's some stuff there for women, not just only men, but it's masculinity applied in different areas of our lives. So you can certainly check out that. And I did a TEDx poem called The Power of Masculinity. It's on that page. You can take a look at that. It's about a 10-minute piece about, what does it really mean to be a man? So, there's a lot to this conversation. There really is a lot to this conversation. What I want to leave you with here in the last few minutes is that healing is possible. So I want to leave you with some takeaways, right? Dads, healing is possible. Tell your daughters that you are proud of them. The title of my book is Daddy, Are You Proud of Me? Because that's the main thing that will start a young girl's healthy self-esteem. Daddy, are you proud of me? All the time, without conditions. We are taught usually as men that pride is reserved for when we performed well. So we were usually only taught that somebody was, or told that somebody was proud of us when we were doing well, when we were winning the games and hitting home runs and bringing home the grades. And so we tend to only give pride when a performance has happened, right? But then we tend to withhold the pride when the performance isn't what we want. And that's extremely detrimental. It's extremely detrimental for everybody, but our daughters specifically. So you can heal whatever your relationship is, dads. You can heal your emotions. You can take control over the things that you might not feel that you have control over. And, if you're interested in more of it, check out the book. It's not out to purchase yet, but you can go to coachshansmith.com /daddy and get on the interest list. And when it does come out, we'll let you know. And we deliver a free chapter for you right away. And I think that first chapter is really going to open you up, especially if you're a dad. Daughters, see your dad through his wounded programming. So everything that I shared with you in the last section wasn't to deflect anything or excuse anything. It was just to hopefully explain so that you can have more peace. As humans, we tend to operate in this right-wrong world. What my mom, dad did was wrong. What my dad did was wrong. They should have been this and they should have been that. And that feels good to our ego, playing the right-wrong game, but it never gives our heart any peace. So understanding why people do things is a way for you to heal as well, but for you to experience more peace in your life. And one of the things that we help our clients do so often, it's one of the things that a lot of the readers of that book said really helped shift. One woman said she read the book and healed her entire relationship with her dad without him ever knowing it. I mean, how cool is that, right? Without him ever knowing it. So you can do a lot of this work on your own, and it will really help if you see your dad through his wounded programming. And don't just see him as a wounded man. If you really want to do this work, see him as a wounded boy who was programmed by a wounded man, by a wounded society, by a wounded collection of men. And I think what you'll notice is that it will help you find more peace in your heart for yourself, maybe for him, maybe forgive. I don't know. Everybody's in different places. But you can do this work regardless. And some of you might not have dads that are alive anymore. Some of your fathers may have passed away, or they might not be emotionally available. And that's also okay. Because I said earlier, I'm glad I remember this. I said earlier that a father's pride is the main ingredient for a woman's self-esteem, but it's not the core ingredient for a woman's self-esteem. The core ingredient is you. It's how you feel about yourself. When you're young, you just start to learn that self-concept through how your father feels about you in his pride. But ultimately, it's you. This work is possible. Hopefully, somewhere in this conversation, there's been an invitation. There's been some dots maybe connected for some of you. And hopefully you can find some kind of hope in to heal with your father, or if you are a dad, to have a different experience on a planet with your emotions or inside of our macho, masculine programming. But the last thing that I want to offer to all women, and again, I don't want this to sound like in any way it's your fault, it's your blame, or it's your problem to solve. But what I do want you to understand is that we men don't thank each other enough. We don't thank each other, men to men. We don't thank each other enough. We don't acknowledge each other enough. And we sure as heck don't hug each other enough. And we don't say, I love you enough. So that's what we can do from men to men. But what will really go a long way is if we hear it from you as well. So if you have it in your heart, if you have it in the space to thank your dad, or thank your husband, or thank somebody who is a dad, just thank them for trying. Thank them for the effort. Thank them for the stuff that you didn't see. Again, you don't have to, this is not dismissive in any way, but it's appreciation that you will be able to live with. And for that, you'll be able to find more peace in your lives. I hope this has been beneficial. It's been an amazing honor for me. I love interacting with all of you. If there's anything I can do to support you, you can find me everywhere at Coach Sean Smith. That is my handle. The women will be back on Monday. So Sabrina, Crisette, Gloria, and Katrina, thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate your trust. I appreciate what you've done in this show and the crowd that you've created, the audience that follows you. You are amazing. And I just am so honored that you gave me a platform and a little bit of time here to share some of my voice. With that, everybody, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll see you again, hopefully sometime soon.